The explosion came at 5:47 a.m. Kabul time, August 26, 2021. Maya Hartwell was 23 years old, standing 15 feet from Abbey Gate when the world turned white. The suicide bomber wore a vest packed with ball bearings and nails designed to shred human flesh at maximum efficiency. The blast wave hit her chest like a freight train, lifting her off her feet, slamming her into the concrete barrier behind her. She didn't hear the screams. The concussion stole sound from the world, left only a high-pitched whine that felt like her skull was splitting open. She hit the ground hard, tasted copper and dirt, felt wetness spreading across her shoulder. Shrapnel. 3 pieces, maybe 4, buried in the meat below her collarbone. She tried to stand, couldn't. Her legs wouldn't answer. Smoke everywhere, thick and black, carrying the smell of burning fuel and something worse, something that used to be human. Through the haze, she saw him. Lieutenant Declan Shaw, 22 years old, sprawled on his back 10 feet away. His body armor was shredded, chest cavity open to the sky. His eyes were still open, staring at nothing. Blood pooled beneath him, spreading like oil on water. Too much blood, impossible amounts. Maya crawled. Her shoulder screamed, shrapnel grinding against bone with every movement. She didn't care. She dragged herself across broken concrete, through debris, and spent shell casings until her hand found his. "Declan." Her voice came out broken raw. "Declan, stay with me." His eyes moved, found her face. Recognition flickered there, brief as lightning. "Tell my dad." Blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth. "The legacy continues." His hand went slack in hers. Maya knelt there in the smoke and the blood, holding the hand of a dead man, while Marines shouted orders around her and the wounded screamed for medics. 13 service members died at Abbey Gate that morning. Declan Shaw was the 7th. She didn't cry. Not then. Not at the memorial service 3 weeks later, when she stood in the back row with her arm in a sling, watching Major Callum Shaw accept the folded flag from a white-gloved honor guard. Not when the plane carried her home to Virginia, where Ghost Viper waited with his weathered face and eyes that saw too much. She'd cried enough. The world didn't need more tears. It needed what Declan had called the legacy. The thing his father had passed to him, the thing Ghost Viper had carved into her bones over 6 brutal years. The will to stand when standing seemed impossible. The skill to fight when fighting seemed futile. The cold, hard certainty that justice mattered more than comfort, more than safety, more than life itself. Maya Hartwell kept her promises. Declan's last words weren't a request. They were an order. And 3 years later, on a humid August morning in North Carolina, she came to Fort Liberty to finish what he'd started. 3 years later, Fort Liberty, North Carolina. The pickup truck coughed to a stop in the visitor lot, engine ticking as heat bled from the block. Maya sat behind the wheel, hands loose on the cracked vinyl, staring at the base entrance through a windshield pitted with bug strikes and road grime. The truck was a 1997 Ford Ranger forest green paint, faded to the color of old moss, rear bumper held on with baling wire. She'd bought it for $800 from a farmer outside Raleigh, paid cash, no questions asked. It looked like poverty on wheels. That was the point. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Plain face, no makeup. Brown hair pulled back in a low ponytail secured with a rubber band that had seen better days. Faded gray t-shirt from a 5K charity run. She'd never attended the kind of shirt you bought at Goodwill for $2. Canvas work pants, the knees permanently stained with something that might have been motor oil. Combat boots, the leather scuffed and cracked, laces frayed. She looked exactly like what she needed to look like. Nobody. The base memorial wall stood 50 yards from the entrance, black granite reflecting the morning sun. Maya knew the names carved there, every single one. She'd memorized them 3 years ago, lying in a hospital bed at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center while surgeons dug shrapnel from her shoulder. Declan Shaw's name was 3rd from the left second row. She didn't need to see it to know it was there. Maya grabbed her backpack from the passenger seat. The canvas was worn thin at the corners, one strap repaired with duct tape. Inside a water bottle, a granola bar, a spiral notebook with blank pages and 3 pens that barely wrote. The backpack of someone who couldn't afford better. She stepped out of the truck. The August heat hit like a wall, humid and oppressive, the kind of heat that turned the red clay soil to dust and made the air shimmer above the asphalt. Fort Liberty sprawled before her, hundreds of acres of training grounds and barracks, obstacle courses and rifle ranges, all of it baking under a merciless Carolina sun. Somewhere in there, Lance Porter was starting his day. 21 days. That's all she had. 3 weeks until Porter's promotion ceremony, when he'd become senior instructor and move into a position where he'd be effectively untouchable. 3 weeks to build a case, gather evidence, and burn down the career of a man who'd spent the last year systematically destroying women who dared to think they belonged here. The guard at the entrance barely looked at her paperwork. Temporary volunteer credentials approved through a sympathetic captain Maya had never met, but who owed favors to people who owed favors to her husband. The military ran on such favors an invisible web of debts and obligations that made things happen without official orders. Logistics support, the guard said, reading from the form. Report to Building 12 Quartermaster's office. Yes, sir. He waved her through without a second glance. She was beneath notice. Exactly as planned. Maya walked across the compound, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes cataloging everything. The layout of the buildings, the patrol patterns of the MPs, the blind spots in the camera coverage. Old habits drilled into her by a man who'd made survival an art form. Ghost Viper had been dead for 2 years now. Heart attack at 72, sitting in his workshop in the Virginia mountains, a half-finished rifle laid across his workbench. She'd found him 3 hours later, still warm, his face peaceful in a way she'd never seen when he was alive. He'd left her everything. The compound, the weapons, the classified files he'd kept in violation of a dozen federal laws, and the legacy. That invisible weight that sat on her shoulders, heavier than any pack she'd ever carried. Building 12 was a low concrete structure, windows barred, the kind of building designed to hold equipment and nothing else. Maya pushed through the door into artificial cold fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. A corporal sat behind a desk, feet up, scrolling through his phone. Help you. He didn't look up. Volunteer assignment, logistics support. Great. Storage rooms through there. Inventory sheets on the clipboard. Don't steal anything. He went back to his phone. Maya walked through the indicated door into a dim storage room filled with equipment racks and supply crates. She set her backpack on an empty shelf, pulled out the notebook, and made a show of checking inventory numbers against the clipboard. She gave it 10 minutes. Then she slipped out the back door. The training yard sprawled before her, a quarter-mile of packed dirt and obstacle courses, pull-up bars and tire runs, everything designed to break bodies and forge them into something harder. Recruits moved in formation, their boots raising dust clouds that hung in the still air. Maya found a bench in the shade, sat down and watched. It took her 15 minutes to spot Lance Porter. He was tall, 6'2", maybe broad shoulders, and the kind of build that came from religious gym attendants. Buzz cut so sharp you could cut paper on it, jaw like a granite block, the kind of face that photographed well and knew it. He moved through the training yard like he owned it. Cadets stepping aside automatically, their eyes following him with a mix of respect and fear. Porter stopped at a water station, filled a bottle, turned his head to scan the yard. His gaze passed over Maya without pause. She was invisible to him. Just another piece of background scenery, a volunteer worker taking a break beneath his notice. She watched him for another 10 minutes, cataloging. The way he moved, the rhythm of his patrol, which cadets he spoke to and which he ignored. She was building a pattern, assembling the pieces of a puzzle she couldn't quite see yet. You lost. Maya turned. A female cadet stood 3 feet away, maybe 22. Blonde hair pulled back in a regulation bun, her face cautious. The name tape on her uniform read, Paige. Just taking a break, Maya said. Her voice came out soft, non-threatening, the voice of someone who didn't want trouble. You're the new volunteer. Not a question. Mallory Page. She didn't offer a hand. Word of advice, don't sit in the shade too long. Captain Dixon sees you, he'll have you running laps. Noted. Thanks. Mallory glanced over her shoulder, checking if anyone was watching, then sat down on the bench. Close, but not too close. The posture of someone who wanted to talk, but couldn't afford to be seen doing it. How many? Maya asked quietly. Mallory's head snapped around. What? How many women has he broken? The silence stretched. Mallory's jaw worked, muscles flexing beneath the skin. Her hands were fists on her knees. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, you do. Maya kept her voice level, matter of fact. 4, maybe 5. Last year alone. All of them quit. Mental health concerns, family emergencies, couldn't hack it. That's what the paperwork says. Mallory stood abruptly. I have drills. You should get back to work. She walked away fast, shoulders tight, hands still clenched. But as she reached the edge of the yard, she looked back. Just once. Her eyes met Maya's, and in that brief contact, Maya saw everything she needed to know. Fear, rage, and the desperate, drowning hope that someone somewhere gave a damn. Maya stood, brushed dust from her pants, and walked back toward Building 12. The corporal was still absorbed in his phone. She grabbed her backpack, signed out on the volunteer log, and headed for the parking lot. The truck started on the 3rd try. She let it idle hands on the wheel, staring at the memorial wall. Declan Shaw had been barely older than Mallory Page when he died. He'd pushed Maya out of the blast radius, taken the full force himself, died, so she could live. He'd done it without hesitation, without calculation, the way you did things when you believed they mattered more than your own survival. Tell my dad, the legacy continues. Maya put the truck in gear and drove toward the base exit. But instead of turning toward the main road, she took a side path that led to the base cemetery. Small, quiet, shaded by old oaks that predated the fort itself. She parked and walked to the far corner where the newest stones stood. Declan Shaw's marker was simple granite, his name and rank and the date he died. Someone had left flowers wilted now, petals brown at the edges. Maya knelt in the grass, ignoring the heat, ignoring the pain that always lived in her left shoulder where the shrapnel had dug deep. "I'm here," she said quietly. "Starting today. 21 days. The stone didn't answer. The dead never did. But she felt something shift inside her chest, a weight settling into place, familiar and terrible. She'd made a promise. 3 years ago, holding his hand while his blood soaked into cobble dust. She'd kept that promise by surviving, by learning, by becoming the thing Ghost Viper had trained her to be. Now she'd keep it by finishing what needed finishing. Maya stood, touched 2 fingers to the stone, and walked back to the truck. The motel was 8 miles from base, the kind of place that rented by the week and didn't ask questions. $40 a night, cash-only mattress that sagged in the middle, and walls thin enough to hear the couple next door arguing about money. Maya sat on the bed, laptop, open files spread around her in careful order. 4 names, 4 women, 4 lives Lance Porter had methodically destroyed. Cadet First Class Rebecca Moss. Quit February 2023, 3 months into training. Official reason, mental health concerns. Unofficial reason. Porter had cornered her in the equipment shed, told her she was too weak, too soft, that she'd get people killed. He'd said it every day for 6 weeks until she broke. No witnesses, no proof. Just her word against a decorated instructor. Cadet Specialist Lauren Vance. Quit July 2023. Official reason, family emergency. Unofficial. Porter had taken photos during a combat training exercise when her uniform had torn, posted them in a private group chat with other instructors. Let the mockery build until she couldn't face the barracks anymore. She'd requested transfer, been denied, quit 3 days later. Cadet Private First Class Kendra Wright. Medical discharge September 2023. Official reason, training accident, severe ankle injury. Unofficial. Porter had sabotaged her rappelling equipment, caused a 20-foot fall that shattered her ankle in 4 places. She'd suspected but couldn't prove it. Neither could the investigators who'd closed the case in 72 hours. Cadet Corporal Jenna Alcott. Disappeared December 2023. Not quit. Not transferred. Just gone. Her family wouldn't talk to investigators, wouldn't talk to reporters. Her social media accounts deleted overnight. The Army listed her as voluntary resignation, processed the paperwork, and moved on. 4 women. 4 different methods. But the same result. Maya had spent 3 months gathering this information, calling in favors, trading intelligence with people who owed her debts they'd never fully repay. She had fragments, pieces, breadcrumbs. What she didn't have was proof. Her phone buzzed. A text message from a number she didn't recognize. Unknown. Building 12. Storage room. 600 tomorrow. Come alone. Maya stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. She lay back on the sagging mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and let her mind drift. Kabul. August 2021. 2 days before the explosion. Declan Shaw sat across from her in the mess tent, pushing MRE spaghetti around his tray without eating. He was young, too young, his face still carrying the softness of someone who hadn't seen enough death to harden completely. "My dad called last night," he said. "Wanted to know if I'd seen you." "What'd you tell him?" "That you were here, that you were good, that Ghost Viper taught you right." He finally looked up. "He wants to meet you, after this deployment." "Why?" "Because you're the third, the only one after me." Declan set down his fork. "You know what that means, right? The old man's legacy. Only 3 people he ever trusted enough to pass it on. First guy died in Fallujah. I'm second. You're third." "I didn't ask for it." "None of us did. That's not how it works." He leaned forward, voice dropping. "Maya, listen to me. Something's wrong here. This evacuation, it's chaos. Too many people, not enough security, bad intel. I'm hearing things. Chatter about attacks, suicide bombers, all of it buried in reports no one's reading. You tell your CO. 3 times. He says it's under control." Declan's jaw tightened. It's not under control. I can feel it. Something bad's coming. Maya had learned to trust those feelings. Ghost Viper had drilled it into both of them. Your gut knows things your brain hasn't figured out yet. When the hackles rise, when the air tastes wrong, when the silence feels too thick, that's when you move. "What do you need?" she asked. "Watch my 6. If it goes sideways, if I go down, you get out. You survive. You tell my dad what happened." He reached across the table, gripped her wrist. "Promise me, you survive. The legacy doesn't die here." She'd promised. 2 days later, he'd pushed her out of the blast radius and died, keeping that legacy alive. Maya woke at 05:30, showered in lukewarm water, and dressed in the same clothes from yesterday. She drove to Fort Liberty in darkness, arriving just as the eastern sky began to pale. Building 12's back door was unlocked. She slipped inside, moved through the dark storage room by feel and memory. Mallory Page sat on a supply crate, arms wrapped around herself, face pale in the dim light filtering through the barred windows. "You came," she said. "You texted. I shouldn't be here. If Porter finds out—" She trailed off, shaking her head. Maya sat on another crate, keeping distance between them, letting Mallory control the space. "Tell me." "There's a file. Porter keeps it on an SD card locked in his personal locker in the instructor barracks. Photos, videos, recordings, everything he's collected on the women he's targeted. Leverage, he calls it. Insurance." Mallory's voice shook. "He showed it to Jenna Alcott before she disappeared. Told her if she didn't quit quietly, he'd send everything to her family, her fiancé, everyone she knew." "How do you know this?" "Because Jenna told me, the night before she left. She was crying so hard she could barely speak. She said Porter had photos of her changing, video of her in the shower, audio of conversations she'd had with her fiancé about quitting. She said he'd been collecting it for months, that she never knew, never suspected." Maya's hands were very still on her knees. "Where is she now?" "I don't know. No one does. Her family won't talk about it. It's like she never existed." Mallory looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "You asked how many. It's not 4. It's 7. Maybe more. Those are just the ones I know about." 7. The number sat in Maya's chest like a stone. "Why are you telling me this?" Mallory laughed, bitter and broken. "Because you're the first person who asked. The first person who looked at this place and saw what I see. Everyone else, they just say, it's training. It's tough. If you can't handle it, you don't belong." She stood abruptly, paced to the window back. "I tried reporting it. 3 times. Different officers, different channels. They all said the same thing. Insufficient evidence. Hearsay. He's a decorated instructor. Why would he risk his career? But you're still here. Someone has to be. Someone has to remember." Mallory turned, and in the growing light, Maya saw something fierce in her face. "I don't know who you really are. But I know you're not a volunteer. I know you're here for a reason, so I'm asking you, whatever you're planning, whatever you're doing, let me help." Maya stood, walked to the window, looked out at the training yard where recruits were already assembling for morning drills. She thought about Declan Shaw bleeding out in Kabul dust, about Ghost Viper teaching her that justice was a choice you made every single day, about the 7 women whose lives Porter had broken because he could, because the system protected him, because no one had stopped him. She turned back to Mallory. "The SD card, can you get access to his locker?" "No, but I know when he's out of the barracks. Thursday nights he goes into town, doesn't come back until late. That's 17 days from now." "I know." Mallory met her eyes. "What are you going to do?" Maya didn't answer directly. "You never saw me. This conversation never happened. If anyone asks, you came here to do inventory, found the door unlocked, secured it, and left. Understand?" "I understand." "Good." Maya picked up her backpack. "Go, before someone sees you." Mallory hesitated, then nodded and slipped out the back door. Maya waited 5 minutes, then followed, locking the door behind her. She had 17 days to build a case. 17 days to gather evidence that would stick, that couldn't be buried, that would bring enough weight to crush Porter no matter how many people wanted to protect him. Ghost Viper had taught her patience. Declan had taught her courage. The women Porter had broken had taught her rage. She'd need all 3. The morning drills started at 700. Maya watched from the quartermaster's office, supposedly sorting supply requisitions, actually cataloging everything happening in the training yard. Captain Dixon ran the formation, his voice carrying across the packed dirt like artillery fire. 53 cadets, mostly male, a handful of women scattered through the ranks. They moved through warm-ups with mechanical precision, push-ups and sit-ups and jumping jacks, the rhythm of exertion and breath. Lance Porter stood at the edge, clipboard in hand, making notes. Every few minutes he'd call out a name, point to a cadet, say something Maya couldn't hear from this distance. But she could see the reactions, the way they stiffened, the way their movements became jerky and uncertain. He was playing them, testing for weakness, probing for the ones who'd break under pressure. It was smart in a predatory way. Find the weak links before they cost lives in the field. Except Porter wasn't winnowing out weakness. He was manufacturing it. At 07:45, the formation broke for water. Cadets scattered to the stations, filled bottles, stood in small clusters, drinking and talking. Maya saw Mallory Page standing alone, deliberately isolated, her eyes on the ground. Porter walked toward her. Maya's hand moved before she thought, reaching for the weapon that wasn't there, hadn't been there for 3 years. She forced her fingers to relax, watched. Porter said something. Mallory's shoulders hunched. He leaned in, voice too low to carry, and whatever he said made Mallory's face go pale. She nodded once, sharp and mechanical, and walked away fast. Porter watched her go, smiling. Maya made a note in her fake requisition log, 0748. Porter isolated Page, verbal harassment, content unknown, witness none. She'd need more than that, much more. The drills ran until 1100, then broke for chow. Maya left the office, walked to the mess hall, stood in line with the volunteers and support staff. The food was institutional and bland: meatloaf that might have been beef, might have been something else, mashed potatoes from a box, green beans cooked to submission. She found a corner table, ate slowly, watched the room. The cadets sat in tribal clusters, self-segregated by some invisible hierarchy. The elite at one table, confident and loud, Porter among them. The middle tier scattered across several tables, trying hard to fit in. The outcasts at the back, quiet and withdrawn. Mallory Page sat alone at the far corner, head down, eating without tasting. Maya wanted to walk over, sit down, tell her it would be okay. But it wouldn't be okay, not yet. And any connection between them would put Mallory at risk. So she finished her meal in silence, bussed her tray, and walked back out into the August heat. The memorial wall called to her. She'd been avoiding it all morning, but she couldn't anymore. She stood before the black granite, her eyes finding Declan's name without searching. Third from the left, second row. Someone had left flowers at the base, wilted now, petals brown at the edges. Declan Shaw had been barely older than Mallory Page when he died. He'd pushed Maya out of the blast radius, taken the full force himself. "You knew him?" Maya turned. A man stood 10 feet away, 50, stocky build, graying hair, cut military short. His face was weathered, carved with lines that spoke of hard years and harder decisions. His eyes were gray like winter sky, fixed on Maya with an intensity that made her want to step back. She knew those eyes. She'd seen them before, younger and filled with grief, accepting a folded flag at a funeral she'd watched from the back row. Major Callum Shaw, Declan's father. "Yes, sir," Maya said quietly. "I knew him." Shaw stepped closer, his gaze moving from her to the wall, finding his son's name with the practiced ease of someone who'd stood here 100 times. "How?" "Kabul. We were both assigned to Abbey Gate security." It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. "You were there when he died?" "Yes, sir." Shaw's jaw worked. He reached out, touched Declan's name with 2 fingers, gentle as a prayer. "He never mentioned you in his letters, but that's not surprising. He kept things close, like his old man." Shaw dropped his hand. "What's your name?" Maya hesitated. Giving her real name would connect her to Garrett Cross, would raise questions she couldn't answer yet, but lying to this man, to Declan's father, felt like desecration. "Maya," she said. "Just the first name, a truth if not the complete one." "Maya." Shaw repeated it like he was testing the weight. "You're not a volunteer, are you?" Her pulse kicked up, but she kept her face neutral. "I'm assigned to logistics support." "That's not what I asked." Shaw turned to face her fully. "I've been watching you since you arrived yesterday. The way you move, the way you scan rooms, the way you position yourself with clear sight lines to exits. That's not volunteer behavior. That's operator training." Damn. She'd been too careful, too precise. Ghost Viper had drilled those habits so deep they'd become reflex. "I did some contract work overseas," she said carefully. "Security consulting. Picked up a few habits." "Uh-huh." Shaw didn't believe her. She could see it in his eyes, but he didn't push. "You know why I'm here?" "No, sir." "Lance Porter. Instructor, 2 years on station, decorated combat record, senator's son." Shaw's voice was flat, emotionless. "Also a predator. 7 confirmed victims that I know of, probably more I don't. He hides behind his father's name and a system that protects its own." Maya's breath caught. "You know." "I know. I've known for 6 months. I've been building a case, gathering evidence, trying to do it by the book." His mouth twisted. "The book protects people like Porter. The book lets him destroy lives because we need evidence that meets an impossible standard. Why are you telling me this? Shaw was quiet for a long moment, looking at his son's name. Because Declan believed in people. He saw good in everyone even when it wasn't there. He died believing this institution mattered, that it stood for something worth dying for. Shaw's voice roughened. I won't let a man like Porter piss on that belief. I won't let him turn this place into his personal hunting ground. He turned back to Maya, and his eyes were hard as flint. You're here for Porter. I don't know how you know about him, I don't know what your connection is, but I can see it in your face. You're hunting him. Maya didn't confirm or deny. Didn't need to. Shaw reached into his pocket, pulled out a small key on a plain steel ring. Storage locker 47, building 8. There's a box inside with my name on it. Copies of everything I've gathered. Statements, medical records, transfer requests. It's not enough for a tribunal, but it's a start. He pressed the key into her palm. Use it. Finish what I can't. Why can't you? Because I'm too close. I'm his instructor supervisor. Anything I do officially gets flagged as a grudge match personality conflict. I'm compromised. Shaw's hand closed over hers, grip firm. But you're not. You're nobody. A volunteer who just happens to be in the right place. If you find evidence, if you bring it forward, it carries weight. I can't give it. Maya looked down at the key. It was warm from his pocket, solid and real. He was my son, Shaw said quietly. The only one I had. He died believing this place mattered. Prove him right. Don't let Porter make him a liar. He released her hand and walked away, shoulders straight, steps measured. A man carrying weight that would crush most people, carrying it anyway because the alternative was unthinkable. Maya stood alone at the memorial wall, key digging into her palm. She'd come here planning to work alone, to build her case in isolation, to trust no one. But Declan Shaw had taught her something in the weeks before he died. You couldn't carry the weight alone. Sometimes you had to trust the person standing beside you, even when trust felt like weakness, especially then. She closed her fist around the key and walked toward Building 8. The storage locker was in the basement behind 3 locked doors that her volunteer credentials shouldn't have opened. But Shaw had given her more than a key. He'd given her access codes written on a slip of paper tucked under the keyring. The box was right where he'd said. Heavy cardboard sealed with packing tape, Shaw written in black marker on the top. Maya carried it to an empty corner, sat with her back against the wall, and opened it. 4 manila folders, 7 USB drives, a stack of printed emails 3 inches thick, and photographs. Dozens of them. Women's faces, some crying, some blank with shock, some twisted in rage. The victims. All of them. Not just 7. 14. 14 women whose lives Porter had damaged or destroyed. 14 sets of dreams crushed under his ego and his cruelty. Maya read through the files, systematically committing details to memory. Names, dates, methods. The pattern was clear once you saw it. Porter targeted women who were competent but isolated. Women who didn't have strong support networks, who wouldn't be believed, who could be pressured into silence. He was smart about it. Never the same method twice. Never anything that left physical evidence. Always careful to maintain plausible deniability. But he'd made one mistake. He'd kept records. The SD card Mallory mentioned, that was his insurance. His leverage to keep victims quiet. But insurance was only valuable if it existed. If someone found it, if someone seized it, it became evidence. Maya closed the last folder and sat in the concrete silence, thinking. 17 days until Thursday night when Porter left the barracks. 17 days to plan, to prepare, to build a trap he wouldn't see coming. Ghost Viper had taught her patience. How to watch, how to wait, how to strike when the enemy thought they were safe. She'd been patient for 3 years. She could be patient 17 more days. Maya packed everything back into the box, carried it to her truck, locked it in the concealed compartment she'd built under the truck bed. Then she drove back to the motel, sat on the sagging mattress, and opened her laptop. She had work to do. Day 3. Maya spent the morning in the quartermaster's office, actually doing the work she was supposed to be doing. Inventory, requisition forms, supply chain management. Boring, tedious, beneath notice. Perfect cover. At 10:30, Lance Porter walked past the window. Maya watched him through her peripheral vision, not turning her head, tracking by sound and shadow. He was talking to another instructor, laughing about something. His voice carried through the thin walls, confident and casual, the voice of a man who'd never faced real consequences. That would change. Maya filed the last requisition form and stood stretching her back. She walked to the water cooler, filled a paper cup, drank slowly. The training yard was busy. Obstacle course runs the cadets moving in pairs, one running while the other called time. She saw Mallory Page halfway through, struggling with the rope climb, her arms shaking with fatigue. Porter stood at the base of the rope watching, waiting. Mallory made it to the top, touched the bell, started down. Her grip slipped on the descent. She fell the last 8 feet, hit the ground hard, rolled to absorb impact, but still came up limping. Porter didn't move to help. He just marked something on his clipboard and walked away. Maya crushed the paper cup in her fist. 17 days felt like forever. She walked back to her desk, pulled out her phone, and sent a text to a number she'd memorized but never saved. Maya, I need background on a senator. Name Porter, first name unknown, son in military Fort Liberty. The response came back in 30 seconds. Unknown Senator Graham Porter, Virginia. 3 terms Armed Services Committee. Son Lance Porter, Captain, Fort Liberty Instructor Cadre. Want the dirt? Maya, everything. Unknown, expensive. Maya, I'm good for it. Unknown, 48 hours. Maya deleted the conversation and pocketed her phone. She had friends in dark places, people who owed her favors from Syria, from Iraq, from a dozen missions that officially never happened. She was calling those markers in now, burning through years of accumulated debt. It would be worth it. At 1700, her shift ended. She signed out, walked to her truck, drove back to the motel. Inside, she pulled out the laptop and started building timelines. 14 victims, 14 separate incidents over 3 years. She plotted them on a calendar, looking for patterns, connections, anything that might predict Porter's next move. There. A gap. 3 months between victim 11 and victim 12. The longest silence in his pattern. Maya pulled up news archives from that period, searching for anything connected to Fort Liberty, to Porter, to the senator. She found it buried in a local newspaper. Small article, 3 paragraphs. Local instructor hospitalized after training accident. Captain Lance Porter, Fort Liberty instructor, was treated for minor injuries after a training accident last March. Sources say Porter was supervising a live fire exercise when a recruit's weapon misfired, striking Porter in the arm. He was released after treatment and returned to duty the following week. Weapon malfunction. But weapons didn't malfunction randomly. They were maintained, inspected, tested. A misfire required specific failures, multiple safety systems bypassed. Someone had tried to kill Lance Porter, and they'd failed. Maya stared at the screen pieces clicking together in her head. Victim 11. Kendra Wright. Medical discharge after Porter sabotaged her rappelling gear. 3 weeks later, Porter nearly died in a weapon malfunction. Had Wright tried to kill him? Had she been that desperate? That broken Maya pulled Wright's file from the box, flipped through medical records, found the doctor's notes. Patient exhibits signs of severe psychological trauma. Recommended psychiatric evaluation. Patient refused treatment, citing concerns about military career impact. Prescribed anti-anxiety medication. Follow-up patient did not return. There was a note stapled to the bottom, handwritten. Patient mentioned making it right multiple times. When pressed, became agitated and left. Consider wellness check. No wellness check had ever happened. Wright had vanished from the system 3 days later. Maya closed the file, rubbed her eyes. She pulled out her phone, called a different number. This one was saved, listed under a single initial. G. It rang twice before a deep voice answered. You're supposed to be maintaining radio silence. I need a favor, Maya said. You need 100 favors. I'm keeping a list. Garrett Cross, her husband, 38 years old and perpetually annoyed that she put herself in danger. What is it this time? Background check. Kendra Wright, former cadet, private first class, medical discharge, Fort Liberty, March 2023. I need to know where she is now. That's not a favor, that's basic database work. I'll have it in an hour. Pause. Maya, are you safe? I'm fine. That's not what I asked. I'm being careful. That's also not what I asked. His voice softened. I know you need to do this. I know why. But if you get hurt because you're trying to fight this battle alone... I'm not alone, Maya said quietly. Declan's father is here. He knows who I am, what I'm doing. The silence on the other end was heavy. Callum Shaw, Garrett said finally. Good man. Lost his son at Abbey Gate. That must have been hard for both of you. It was necessary. Necessary isn't the same as easy. Garrett sighed. I'll get you the information. But Maya promised me something. If this goes sideways, if you need extraction, you call me. Not a text, a call, and I will burn this place to the ground to get you out. Understood? Understood. I love you, even when you're being impossibly stubborn and risking your life for people who don't know you exist. I love you too. She hung up before he could say anything else, before the weight of his worry could add to the weight she was already carrying. Her phone buzzed 90 minutes later. An email from an encrypted address, No subject line, just a PDF attachment. Kendra Wright's file. Current address, Asheville, North Carolina. Employment, none listed. Medical status, ongoing physical therapy for permanent ankle damage. Last known contact, family emergency room visit, May 2024. Panic attack requiring sedation. There was a photo attached. Wright sitting in a wheelchair, face hollow, eyes distant. The caption, patient exhibits signs of severe PTSD and major depressive disorder. Refuses psychiatric care. Prognosis poor. Maya closed the laptop. 17 days. She needed to move faster. Day 7. Maya stood in the equipment shed at 05:30 before the sun had burned the dew off the grass before the base came alive with the sounds of morning formation. The shed smelled of gun oil and canvas metal and dust, familiar scents that brought her back to 100 other mornings in 100 other places. She'd come here because Mallory Page had left a note tucked into a supply requisition form. 3 words written in pencil. Thursday. Equipment shed. Maya checked her watch. Mallory was late. The door opened. Mallory slipped inside, breathing hard, her face pale in the dim light filtering through the high windows. "I can't do this anymore," she said without preamble. Maya waited. "Porter cornered me yesterday. After drills. He said he knew I'd been talking to people asking questions about the women who quit." Mallory's hands shook. "He showed me photos on his phone. Me in the shower, me changing clothes. He said he has videos too, months of them. He said if I don't stop asking questions, if I don't keep my mouth shut, he'll send everything to my family." "Did you tell anyone?" "Who would I tell? Captain Dixon, he's Porter's friend. Colonel Brennan, he'd want proof, and I don't have proof, just Porter's word against mine." Mallory wrapped her arms around herself. "I looked up the other women, the ones who quit. I found 3 of them online. They won't talk to me. 1 blocked me. 1 told me to stop digging before I get hurt. The 3rd one just cried and hung up." Maya moved to the window, checking the yard. Empty still. They had maybe 10 minutes before the early risers started their pre-formation routines. "You need to transfer," Maya said. "What?" "Put in for transfer. Different base, different command. Do it today. Make up a family emergency, sick relative, anything. Get out before Thursday." "I'm not running." Mallory's voice hardened. "That's what he wants. That's what he does. He makes us run. Running isn't losing. It's surviving. Surviving isn't enough." Mallory stepped closer. "You don't get it. I came here because my brother served. He was a Marine, did 2 tours in Iraq, came home and put a gun in his mouth because the VA wouldn't help him, and his command didn't care, and everyone told him to just tough it out." Her voice cracked. "I joined to honor him, to prove that service matters, that this institution is worth defending. If I run now, if I let Porter chase me off, then my brother died for nothing." Maya understood that logic. She'd used the same logic herself 3 years ago, lying in a hospital bed in Germany, while doctors told her she'd never regain full mobility in her left shoulder. She'd proved them wrong through spite and stubbornness, and the memory of Declan Shaw bleeding out while she lived. "Okay," Maya said quietly. "You don't run, but you don't engage with Porter either. You stay away from him, you don't give him ammunition, you don't give him an excuse." "For how long?" 10 days. Can you last 10 days? Mallory thought about it, then nodded. "What happens in 10 days? I'm going to need you to trust me. I don't even know your real name. My name is Maya Hartwell. 3 years ago, I was embedded with Marine security forces at Kabul airport. I was there when Abbey Gate exploded. I watched 13 Americans die, including a man who saved my life." Maya met Mallory's eyes. "I know what it's like to watch good people destroyed by a system that should protect them. I know what it's like to want justice and have everyone tell you to let it go. So I'm asking you to trust me. Not because you know me. Because we both know what Porter is." Mallory was quiet for a long moment, studying Maya's face. 10 days, she said finally. "Then what? Then Porter's going to make a mistake, and when he does, we're going to bury him." Mallory left first, slipping out the side door, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness. Maya waited 5 minutes, then followed. The sun was rising now, painting the eastern sky in shades of copper and gold. Maya walked to the memorial wall, stood before Declan Shaw's name. "I need you to trust me too," she said quietly. "I know what I'm doing. Your father gave me the tools. Mallory gave me the timeline. I just need the evidence." The stone didn't answer. But standing there watching the sunrise, Maya felt something settle in her chest. A certainty. a cold, hard knowledge that she was on the right path. She walked back to her truck and drove to the motel. Inside, she pulled out the laptop and opened the encrypted files Garrett had sent overnight. Senator Graham Porter's entire life laid out in folders and documents and financial records. 3 terms in the Senate Armed Services Committee Defense Appropriations Subcommittee. A career built on military credentials and family legacy, 4 generations of Porters who'd served with distinction. And a son who was burning that legacy to ash. Maya found what she needed buried in campaign finance records. Senator Porter had made substantial donations to Fort Liberty's family support programs. Legal public, nothing suspicious. But the timing was interesting. Each donation came within weeks of his son's victims quitting or transferring. February 2023, Rebecca Moss quit. March 2023, Porter donated $50,000 to the base mental health program. July 2023, Lauren Vance quit. August 2023, another $50,000 to family services. The pattern held for all 14 victims. The senator was buying silence. Not directly, not obviously, but through careful public relations, through donations that looked generous and patriotic, through building goodwill that made it harder to question his son's behavior. Smart, insidious, and almost impossible to prove as obstruction. Maya made notes, built spreadsheets, traced the money. She had 10 days to turn suspicion into evidence. Her phone buzzed. Text from Callum Shaw. Shaw Building 8. Basement. Now. She grabbed her keys and drove. Shaw was waiting in the same storage room where she'd found his box. He looked like he hadn't slept, his face-drawn eyes bloodshot. "I got a call last night," he said without preamble. "Senator Porter's office. Very polite, very professional. They wanted to inform me that they're aware of my interest in certain personnel matters. They suggested that continued pursuit of unfounded accusations could negatively impact my career. They threatened you." "They threatened me." Shaw's jaw tightened. "I've been doing this for 26 years. I've faced down insurgents and warlords and politicians who thought they could buy their way past accountability. But I've never had a United States senator personally call to tell me to back off his rapist son." Did I what? Back off?" Shaw looked at her like she'd suggested he shoot himself. "I told him to go fuck himself. Professionally. With proper respect for his office." He pulled a USB drive from his pocket. "This arrived this morning. Anonymously. No return address, no note. Just this." He handed it to Maya. She turned it over in her palm. "Standard capacity, no markings." "You haven't looked at it." "I can't. If I access it officially, it becomes part of an investigation I'm not authorized to conduct. But you're not official. You're nobody." He met her eyes. "Look at it. Tell me what we're dealing with." Maya pocketed the drive. "The senator called you personally. That means he's scared. That means we're close to something. Or it means he's about to bury us under lawyers and political pressure. Let him try." Maya turned toward the door. "I need to ask you something. Declan, in the weeks before Kabul, did he ever mention Porter or problems with female recruits?" Shaw frowned, thinking. "He mentioned the training program was getting toxic. Said some of the instructors were more interested in breaking people than building them. I told him to document it, file formal complaints through proper channels." His voice roughened. "I gave him the same advice I've been giving myself. Follow the rules. Trust the system." The system protected Porter. The system failed my son, and 7 women, and Christ knows how many others we don't know about. Shaw's hands were fists at his sides. "I spent 3 years telling myself that if I just followed procedure, if I just built the case properly, justice would happen. But procedure is designed to protect the institution, not the victims. And I'm done waiting for the institution to give a damn." Maya understood. She'd learned the same lesson in Kabul, watching bureaucrats prioritize optics over security, watching good people die because someone 3,000 miles away had decided that admitting vulnerability was worse than preventing tragedy. "Thursday night," she said. "That's when we move. I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing. I trust you more than I trust the system." Shaw headed for the door, then stopped. "My son's last words. Do you know what they were?" Maya's throat tightened. "He said the legacy continues. He was talking about you, specifically. He called me 2 days before the explosion, told me he'd met Ghost Viper's 3rd student, said she was better than both of us, that if anything happened to him I should find you." Shaw's eyes were wet. "I've been looking for you for 3 years, and here you are walking into the same fight that got him killed." "This isn't Kabul." "No, it's worse, because the enemy wears the same uniform we do." He left. Maya stood alone in the basement holding the USB drive, feeling its weight like an anchor. She drove back to the motel, locked the door, closed the curtains. She inserted the drive into her laptop, ran a malware scan, then opened the files. Video files, dozens of them. She clicked the first one. The footage was grainy, shot from a hidden camera, the angle suggesting it had been placed high in a corner. A locker room. Women changing after training, unaware they were being filmed. The timestamp read, March 2022. Maya's stomach turned. She forced herself to watch, to catalog, to document. 14 files, 14 different women. Some were the victims Shaw had already identified. Others were new. Women who'd never filed complaints, who'd quit or transferred without making waves, who'd disappeared into civilian life carrying trauma they'd never report. The last file was different. It was audio only. A conversation between two men, the voices distorted but recognizable. Porter and someone else, someone older. You need to be more careful. The Shaw girl is asking questions. Mallory Page. She's nobody. I'll handle it the same way I handled the others. Your father is concerned. He's making calls, smoothing things over, but eventually someone's going to notice the pattern. Let them notice. I'm a decorated combat veteran. Who's going to believe some hysterical cadet over me? That's exactly the attitude that's going to get you court-martialed. You need to back off for a while. Let things cool down. I don't take orders from my father's assistant. You'll take orders from whoever keeps you out of Leavenworth. The audio cut off. Maya played it again, listening for background noise, anything that might identify the second speaker. She heard papers shuffling, the hum of air conditioning, a phone ringing in the distance. An office, probably on base given the military standard ringtone. She copied everything to an encrypted backup, then removed the drive and locked it in her truck's hidden compartment. 10 days. She had 10 days to turn raw footage into actionable evidence, to build a case that couldn't be dismissed or buried, to find the leverage that would make Porter's untouchable status evaporate. Day 10. Maya sat in the quartermaster's office processing supply requests when Mallory walked past the window. Her face was bruised, left eye swollen, nearly shut, lips split. Maya was out of her chair and through the door before conscious thought caught up. What happened? Mallory flinched away. Training accident. I fell during the obstacle course. You're lying. I fell. That's my story. That's what's in the incident report. Mallory's good eye was hard. Let it go. Did Porter? I said, let it go. She walked away fast, favoring her left side like broken ribs hurt with every breath. Maya stood in the middle of the yard, rage building in her chest like pressure behind a dam. She wanted to find Porter, drag him into a room and show him what real violence looked like. Wanted to break his hands so he could never hurt anyone again. But that wasn't justice. That was revenge. And revenge wouldn't stop the next Porter, wouldn't fix the system that enabled him. She forced herself to breathe, to think, to plan. 7 days until Thursday. She walked back inside, pulled out her phone and sent a text to the number she'd used before. Maya, I need a body camera. Police grade. Motion activated. Deliverable to Fort Liberty anonymous package. Unknown 48 hours. Expensive. Maya Bill Garrett. Unknown. Done. 2 days later, a package arrived at the quartermaster's office addressed to Maya Hartwell, marked as supply equipment. Inside, a body camera no larger than a button, battery life, 12 hours storage capacity, 64 gigabytes. Maya tested it in the motel room, checking angles, reviewing footage. The quality was excellent, the microphone sensitive enough to pick up whispered conversations. Ghost Viper had taught her that the best weapons were the ones the enemy didn't see coming. Day 14. Maya woke to pounding on her motel room door. She was on her feet instantly, hand reaching for the weapon that wasn't there, heart hammering. Maya, it's me. Open up. Garrett's voice. She unlocked the door. He pushed inside, closed it behind him, locked it. You need to leave, now, today. What happened? Senator Porter filed a formal complaint with Base Command. He's alleging that an unidentified individual is conducting unauthorized surveillance of his son, gathering information for purposes of harassment and defamation. Garrett's face was grim. He's demanding a full investigation, threatening to subpoena volunteer records, run background checks on everyone who's been on base in the last month. He can't. He absolutely can. He's a senator on armed services. He can make life hell for everyone here until he gets what he wants. Garrett gripped her shoulders. Maya, if they run your background, if they connect you to me, to Shaw, to Kabul, this whole thing falls apart. You become the story instead of Porter. Maya pulled away, paced to the window. Outside, the parking lot was empty, morning sun glinting off windshields. I have 6 days. 6 days until Thursday, when Porter leaves the barracks and I can access his locker. You won't make it 6 days. The investigation starts tomorrow. They'll pull volunteer records, interview everyone who's had contact with Porter. Garrett's voice softened. I know what you're trying to do. I know why. But you can't win this fight if you're arrested for trespassing or surveillance or whatever charges they manufacture. Maya thought about Mallory Page's split lip, about Kendra Wright in a wheelchair, eyes dead, about 7 women whose lives Porter had destroyed while the system looked away, about Declan Shaw, 22 years old, bleeding out in Kabul dust because he'd pushed her clear of a bomb. I'm not leaving. Maya, I made a promise, to Declan, to his father, to every woman Porter broke. She turned to face Garrett. I'm not leaving until this is finished. Garrett stared at her for a long moment, then sighed and pulled out his phone. Then we accelerate the timeline. Thursday's too late. We move tomorrow night. Porter won't be gone tomorrow night? No, but I will be here. He made a call, spoke quietly into the phone. I'm pulling rank, scheduling an emergency inspection of instructor quarters, specifically the instructor barracks. Colonel Brennan will accompany me. We'll have access to every locker, every room, full legal authority. You can't be part of this. If it comes out that you helped me, I'm not helping you. I'm conducting a routine inspection based on credible reports of unauthorized materials in instructor quarters. Garrett's smile was cold. If we happen to find Lance Porter's SD card during that inspection, well, that's just good police work. Maya wanted to argue, wanted to tell him to stay clear to protect his career, but she'd learned in 6 years of marriage that Garrett Cross was as stubborn as she was and twice as willing to burn bridges when justice demanded it. What do you need from me? Nothing. You stay away from base tomorrow. Go into town, establish an alibi, be anywhere except Fort Liberty. He checked his watch. The inspection happens at 1800 hours. By 1900 we'll have everything we need. And if Porter's father intervenes, let him try. I'm a 2-star general with JSOC authority. The senator can make noise, but he can't stop a lawful inspection based on credible intelligence. Garrett pulled her close, kissed her forehead. Trust me. I've been doing this longer than you have. She wanted to, but trust was a luxury she'd learned to ration carefully. Day 15. Maya spent the day in Asheville, 3 hours from Fort Liberty, sitting in a coffee shop with her laptop building the final pieces of her case. She had the video files from the anonymous USB drive. She had Shaw's documentation of 14 victims. She had Porter's pattern mapped across 3 years. What she needed was the SD card. The original files in Porter's possession, proof that he'd been collecting and storing this material deliberately. Her phone buzzed at 1847. Garrett, inspection in progress. Stand by. She waited, forced herself to sip coffee to appear normal, to not check her phone every 30 seconds. 1923. Another text. Garrett, package secured. Multiple items of interest. Will brief tomorrow. Maya closed her laptop, paid for her coffee, walked to her truck. The drive back to Fort Liberty took 3 hours. She spent them thinking about what came next. The SD card would have everything. But evidence alone wasn't enough. They needed a venue, a forum where Porter couldn't hide behind his father's influence, where the victims could speak without fear of retaliation. She needed Callum Shaw. At 2300, she parked outside Building 8, walked down to the basement storage room. Shaw was waiting, sitting on a supply crate, a bottle of whiskey at his feet. Your husband is either very brave or very stupid, he said. Both. He found 3 SD cards. 3. Porter had backups of his backups. Shaw's voice was hollow. I've been watching the footage for 2 hours. There are 23 women on those cards. 23. Most of them I don't even recognize. They quit before I started tracking. Maya sat down across from him. Can we use it? In a court-martial. Absolutely. It's damning. But getting to a court-martial requires formal charges, requires going through Porter's chain of command, requires convincing people who've been protecting him to suddenly stop. Shaw took a drink. His father's already making calls. I got word an hour ago that I'm being reassigned. Effective next week. Some desk job in Arlington where I can't cause trouble. They're burying you. They're trying to. He set down the bottle. But here's the thing about burial. Sometimes what's buried doesn't stay dead. It waits, it festers, and eventually it claws its way back to the surface. Maya understood what he was suggesting. We go public. We go nuclear. We take everything, the videos, the documentation, the pattern, all of it, and we give it to someone who can't be silenced, someone the senator can't threaten or buy off. Who? Shaw smiled, bitter and sharp. There's a reporter. She covers military affairs for the Washington Post. She's been trying to get me to talk about Fort Liberty's problems for 6 months. I kept telling her no, that I was handling it through proper channels. He laughed without humor. Proper channels. Christ. If we give this to a reporter, Porter walks. No court-martial, no military justice, just public humiliation and maybe a civilian trial that takes years. And 23 women get to see their abuser's face on national news. 23 women get validation that they weren't crazy, weren't weak, weren't asking for it. Shaw leaned forward. Military justice has failed them. The institution has failed them. Maybe public shame will succeed where everything else didn't. Maya thought about Mallory Page's bruised face, about Kendra Wright in a wheelchair, about women she'd never meet, whose names she didn't know, whose lives Porter had damaged in ways that would never fully heal. "We need their permission," she said. "The victims. We need them to agree to go public. I've been making calls. I've reached 11 of them. 8 are willing to talk. 3 want nothing to do with it." Shaw's hands were shaking. "The 8 who'll talk, that's enough. That's a pattern no one can ignore." "When?" "Tomorrow. I've arranged a meeting at a hotel in Raleigh, neutral ground away from the base. The reporter will be there. So will the victims who are willing to speak, and so will the evidence." He looked at Maya. "I need you there. You're the one who broke this open. You're the one who had the courage to do what I couldn't. I'm nobody. This is your fight." "No, it's our fight. Declan's fight. Every person who ever believed this institution stood for something worth defending." Shaw stood, offered his hand. "Thank you. For giving a damn when you didn't have to." Maya shook his hand. "Declan saved my life. This is the least I can do." Day 16. The hotel conference room in Raleigh was anonymous and sterile, the kind of space designed for corporate meetings and forgettable events. Maya arrived early, helped Shaw set up the laptop and projector-arranged chairs in a semicircle. The victims arrived one by one, nervous and uncertain. Maya recognized some faces from the video files. Others were strangers. Mallory Page came last, her bruises faded to yellow and green, her jaw set with determination. "You're not a volunteer," she said to Maya. "No. Who are you really?" "Someone who knows what it's like to watch good people destroyed by a broken system." Mallory nodded slowly. "Good enough." The reporter arrived at 1400 exactly on time. 40 sharp-eyed, carrying a recorder she set on the table without asking permission. "Andrea Chen, Washington Post," she said, shaking Shaw's hand but not approaching the victims. Professional distance. "I need to verify some things before we start. Major Shaw, you're willing to go on record about systematic harassment and abuse at Fort Liberty?" "Yes." "And you understand this will likely end your military career?" "I'm already being reassigned for asking too many questions. My career is over either way. At least this way it means something." Chen turned to the assembled women. "You're all willing to share your experiences?" They nodded, some confident, some terrified. "Then let's begin." For 3 hours, Maya listened to stories that made her want to break things. Women describing how Porter had isolated them, targeted them, gathered blackmail material over months or years. How he'd threatened their families, their careers, their reputations. How they'd tried to report him and been told they were overreacting, that boys would be boys, that maybe they'd misunderstood his intentions. Mallory spoke last. Her voice was steady despite the tremor in her hands. "He told me I was weak, that I didn't belong, that every woman who tried to serve was taking a spot from a man who deserved it more." She looked directly at the camera. "But I'm still here. I'm still standing. And I'm not weak. None of us are weak. We survived him." When the interviews finished, Shaw played the video files from the SD cards. Chen watched in silence, her face hardening with every minute. "This is actionable," she said when the footage ended. "Criminal charges, civil suits, congressional investigation. Senator Porter won't be able to protect his son from this." "When can you publish?" Shaw asked. 72 hours. I need to verify sources, get legal clearance, build the full narrative." She looked around the room. "But once this goes live, there's no taking it back. You'll all be in the spotlight. The senator will come after you with everything he has." "Let him come," Mallory said. "I'm tired of hiding." The other women nodded, a wave of agreement spreading through the room. Chen packed up her equipment. "I'll be in touch. Stay available, keep your phones on, and be ready for the storm." She left. The victims left one by one, heading back to their lives, their families, their attempts at normalcy. Maya and Shaw sat alone in the empty conference room. 3 days, Shaw said. 3 days until the world knows what Lance Porter really is. His father will try to kill the story. He can try, but Andrea Chen doesn't kill easily. She's been a thorn in the Pentagon's side for a decade. Shaw stood, stretched his back. I should feel good about this, victorious. But mostly I just feel tired. That's because you've been carrying this alone for too long. I've been carrying it since Declan died, since I realized the institution he died for would rather protect a predator than admit it had a problem. Shaw walked to the window, looked out at the parking lot. I lied to you. About Declan's last words. Maya went still. You said he told you the legacy continues. And he did say that. But his actual last words, the very last thing he said before he died. Shaw's voice broke. He said, don't let them forget. Don't let it be for nothing. I won't. I know. That's why I'm telling you. He turned from the window. When this story breaks, when Porter goes down, people are going to ask why it took so long. Why the system failed. Why no one stopped him sooner. His eyes were red. And I'm going to tell them the truth. That I knew. That I tried. That I failed. That it took someone outside the system to do what I should have done 3 years ago. You did everything you could. I did everything the rules allowed. Turns out that wasn't enough. He headed for the door. I'm driving back to base. You should stay here tonight. Keep your distance until the story drops. Maya watched him leave, then sat alone in the conference room for a long time. Her phone buzzed. Text from Garrett. Garrett, Senator Porter demanded my reassignment. Pentagon told him to pound sand. You're safe for now. Maya. How long is now? Garrett, 72 hours. After the story drops, all bets are off. She deleted the conversation and left the hotel. Day 18. Maya spent 2 days in Raleigh, staying in a different motel, waiting for the storm. She reviewed the case files, built timelines, prepared for the questions that would come when the story broke. Her phone rang at 600. Unknown number. Maya Hartwell. Yes. This is Andrea Chen. The story goes live in 2 hours. I wanted to give you advance warning. Thank you. There's something you should know. Senator Porter got wind of the investigation. He's planning a press conference this morning to preempt the story. He's going to claim this is a political hit job, that his son is being targeted because of the senator's work on defense oversight. Maya's jaw tightened. Will it work? Not once people see the videos, but he'll try to muddy the waters, create enough doubt to protect his son from criminal charges. Chen paused. I need to ask you something. You've stayed mostly anonymous in this investigation. Background source, unnamed witness. But if you were willing to go on record, if you were willing to share your connection to Declan Shaw and Kabul, it would add weight the senator can't dismiss. I'm not a victim. I'm just someone who... You're someone who watched 13 Americans die at Abbey Gate. Someone who was there when Declan Shaw gave his life to save others. Someone who understands what real service looks like. Chen's voice was steady. The senator is going to paint this as disgruntled cadets making false accusations. But if a decorated combat veteran stands up and says, "This matters," that changes the narrative. Maya closed her eyes, thinking. Going public meant exposing herself, meant linking her name to this fight in ways that couldn't be undone, meant accepting that her life would never be private again. But Declan Shaw hadn't had the option to stay anonymous. He'd died in public violently, his death witnessed by thousands and broadcast worldwide. The least she could do was stand in the light and tell the truth. I'll do it. Thank you. I'm sending a car. Be ready in 30 minutes. The interview took place in a Washington Post studio, professional lights and cameras, makeup artists trying to cover the scar on her shoulder where Kabul shrapnel had dug deep. Chen asked careful questions, building the narrative slowly. Maya's service record, her time embedded with Marine forces, the explosion at Abbey Gate, Declan Shaw's sacrifice. Then the hard questions. Why did you come to Fort Liberty? Because I heard about women being systematically driven out of service. Because I knew that Declan Shaw would have wanted someone to stand up and say this wasn't acceptable. You weren't ordered to investigate. You did this on your own. I did it because it was right. Lance Porter's father is claiming this is a politically motivated attack. What do you say to that? Maya looked directly at the camera. I say that 23 women deserve better than to have their trauma dismissed as politics. I say that Declan Shaw died believing this institution stood for something worth defending. And I say that if exposing abuse is political, then maybe we need more politics and less silence. The interview ended. Chen shook her hand. That was perfect. Exactly what we needed. When does it air? 1 hour. Along with the main story, the victim interviews, and the video evidence? Chen smiled. Get somewhere safe. The blowback is going to be intense. Maya drove back to her motel, turned on the television, and waited. At 1,000 hours, the story broke. The headline, "Systematic Abuse at Fort Liberty, Decorated Instructor Accused of Targeting Female Recruits." Below it, a photo of Lance Porter in dress uniform smiling confident. And beside that, photos of the victims. 23 faces, 23 names, 23 stories of betrayal and survival. Maya's phone exploded with messages, Garrett checking if she was safe, Shaw thanking her for going public, Mallory sending a single thumbs-up emoji, and then at 10:15, a different kind of message. Senator Graham Porter's press conference broadcast live on C-SPAN. Maya watched the senator stand at a podium flanked by lawyers, his face grave and sympathetic. "These allegations against my son are false, malicious, and politically motivated," he said. "Lance Porter is a decorated combat veteran who has served his country with distinction. The individuals making these accusations have been contacted by a discredited reporter with a known bias against the military establishment." He continued for 20 minutes, deflecting, denying, attacking the credibility of the victims and the journalists. But Maya noticed something. His hands shook when he gripped the podium. His voice wavered on certain words. And when a reporter asked if he'd seen the video evidence, he refused to answer. The senator was scared. At 1100, the Pentagon issued a statement. "The Department of Defense takes all allegations of misconduct seriously. An investigation has been opened into the events at Fort Liberty. Captain Lance Porter has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. Not an admission, not an apology, but a crack in the wall." Maya's phone rang. Callum Shaw. "Turn on CNN." She switched channels. The news anchor was interviewing one of the victims, Rebecca Moss, the woman who'd quit in February 2023. "He told me I was worthless," Moss said, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. "He told me I'd get people killed. He destroyed my confidence so completely that I believed him. I quit because I thought I was protecting my fellow soldiers from my inadequacy." The anchor asked, "What made you come forward now?" "Because someone finally believed us. Because someone finally said this wasn't acceptable. Because I'm tired of being afraid." The interview continued. Other victims appeared one after another, telling their stories on national television. By evening, Lance Porter's name was trending on social media. By midnight, calls for congressional hearings were echoing through the Senate. And by morning of day 19, Captain Lance Porter was arrested by military police and escorted to the brig at Fort Liberty. The charges: conduct unbecoming an officer, sexual harassment, unlawful surveillance, obstruction of justice. Maya watched the arrest on live television. Porter in handcuffs, his face pale and shocked. Senator Graham Porter stood beside his son. But for the first time, he had nothing to say. Justice wasn't finished. The trial would take months, maybe years. The senator would fight with everything he had. But the wall had cracked, and light was pouring through. The court-martial convened 47 days after the Washington Post story broke. The tribunal chamber at Fort Liberty was smaller than Maya had expected: wood-paneled walls and fluorescent lights that hummed with electrical current, rows of wooden benches for observers. It felt more like a high school auditorium than a place where careers ended and lives were judged. Maya sat in the back row, anonymous in civilian clothes, her hair pulled back tight, no makeup. She'd learned years ago that invisibility was a choice, a skill you cultivated when you needed the world to look past you. Callum Shaw sat 3 rows ahead, his uniform pressed sharp enough to cut his back military straight. He hadn't spoken to her since the story broke, hadn't needed to. They'd both done what needed doing. Words would only dilute what mattered. The prosecution entered first. A lieutenant colonel Maya didn't recognize, carrying 3 banker's boxes filled with evidence, his face set with the grim determination of a man who knew he was about to destroy another officer's life and had made peace with the necessity. Then the defense. 2 civilian lawyers in expensive suits hired by Senator Porter, their expressions confident in the way of people who'd never lost a case they couldn't buy their way out of. Finally, Lance Porter. He wore dress blues, chest bare of the ribbons and medals he'd been stripped of when the charges were filed. His face was thinner than Maya remembered. Cheekbones, sharp eyes carrying the hunted look of someone who'd spent 6 weeks in pre-trial confinement, realizing that Daddy's money couldn't buy everything. The military judge entered. Colonel Patricia Vance, 62 years old, 38 years of service, a woman whose reputation for fairness was matched only by her reputation for zero tolerance of bullshit. She'd presided over war crimes tribunals in the Hague court-martials of general officers' cases that had ended careers and sent men to Leavenworth for the rest of their lives. She looked at Porter the way you'd look at something scraped off your boot. This tribunal will come to order." Her voice carried authority like other people carried weapons. "Captain Porter, you stand accused of 14 counts of conduct unbecoming an officer, 23 counts of unlawful surveillance, 7 counts of sexual harassment, and 4 counts of obstruction of justice. How do you plead?" Porter stood. His lawyers stood with him. "Not guilty, Your Honor." "So noted." Vance looked at the prosecution. "Colonel Matthews, you may proceed." The prosecution's case was methodical, brutal, undeniable. They started with the SD cards playing excerpts from the video files. The courtroom watched in silence as footage rolled of women changing in locker rooms, unaware of hidden cameras, their privacy violated in ways that made Maya's hands clench into fists. Porter's lawyers objected repeatedly. Inadmissible evidence, improper chain of custody, violation of attorney-client privilege. Vance overruled every objection, her face growing harder with each protest. "Counselor," she said after the 7th objection, "your client filmed these women without consent, stored the footage for purposes of blackmail and harassment, and you want to argue about chain of custody? Sit down before I hold you in contempt." The lawyer sat. Next came the victims. 8 of them took the stand over 3 days, telling stories that painted a picture of systematic abuse spanning 3 years. Rebecca Moss described how Porter had cornered her in the equipment shed, told her she was too weak to serve, that she'd get people killed, that she should quit before she dishonored everyone who'd ever worn the uniform. Lauren Vance testified about the photos Porter had taken when her uniform tore during training, how he'd shared them in private chat groups, how the mockery had built until she couldn't face her fellow recruits. Kendra Wright rolled to the witness stand in a wheelchair, her ankles still scarred from the rappelling fall Porter had engineered. She described the moment she'd realized her equipment had been tampered with, the long fall, the impact that had shattered bone and ended her career. "I knew it was him," she said quietly. "I knew, but I couldn't prove it. The investigators closed the case in 72 hours. Told me accidents happen. Told me to focus on recovery." "Did you ever confront Captain Porter?" the prosecutor asked. "Once. 3 weeks after the accident. I asked him if he'd sabotaged my gear." Wright's hands trembled on the wheelchair arms. "He smiled and said if I ever made that accusation publicly, he'd make sure everyone knew I was unstable, damaged, making up stories to explain my own failure." The courtroom was silent. Porter's face was stone. His lawyers tried to break the victims on cross-examination, suggesting they were confused, mistaken, motivated by desire for attention or financial compensation. But the victims didn't break. They'd survived Porter. A hostile lawyer was nothing by comparison. Mallory Page testified on day 4. Her bruises had faded, but the memory remained in the tight set of her jaw, the way her eyes never left Porter's face. "He told me he had videos of me showering," she said. "That if I didn't stop asking questions about the other women, he'd send the footage to my family, to my church, to everyone I knew." "Did he show you these videos?" "He showed me screenshots on his phone, told me he had hours of footage. Told me I had 48 hours to decide if I wanted to keep my dignity or keep asking questions." "What did you do?" "I went to someone I trusted, someone who believed me." Mallory glanced at the back row, her eyes finding Maya's for just a moment. "And that person helped me find the courage to fight back." The prosecutor entered the SD cards into evidence, entered Shaw's documentation, entered financial records showing Senator Porter's donations, timed to match his son's victims quitting. "The pattern is clear," Colonel Matthews said in his closing argument. "Captain Porter targeted women systematically. He isolated them, gathered blackmail material, destroyed their confidence and careers, and when they tried to report him, the institution failed them. It took a combat veteran from outside the chain of command to expose what everyone inside should have seen." He sat down. Porter's lead attorney stood. James Whitfield, 65, silver-haired, famous for getting guilty clients acquitted through procedural technicalities and jury manipulation. "Your Honor, members of this tribunal," he began, his voice smooth as aged whiskey, "what we have here is not evidence of guilt, but evidence of a coordinated campaign to destroy a decorated officer's career. Captain Porter has served his country with distinction in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's trained hundreds of recruits, the vast majority of whom have nothing but respect for his methods." He paced the well of the courtroom, hands gesturing, voice building. "Yes, Captain Porter kept video files, but those files were for training purposes, to document problems with facility security, to identify areas where female recruits needed additional privacy protections. The prosecution has twisted innocent documentation into something sinister." Matthews shot to his feet. "Your Honor, the defense can't seriously argue." "Sit down, Colonel. Mr. Whitfield, finish your statement." "Thank you, Your Honor." Whitfield turned to face the tribunal directly. My client's only crime was caring too much about standards. In an era where the military is under pressure to lower requirements to accommodate social engineering, Captain Porter stood firm. He demanded excellence. He refused to graduate recruits who couldn't meet the standard, and for that he's been vilified by those who couldn't measure up. He sat down confident, certain he'd planted enough doubt. Vance looked at the tribunal members, 5 senior officers who'd sat through 4 days of testimony with faces carved from granite. The tribunal will deliberate. We reconvene tomorrow at 900 for the verdict. Maya left the courtroom and drove to the base cemetery. Evening was falling, the August heat finally breaking a breeze carrying the scent of cut grass and distant rain. She stood at Declan Shaw's grave, hands in her pockets, looking at the simple marker. "It's almost over," she said quietly. "The tribunal will convict him. They have to. The evidence is overwhelming." The stone didn't answer. The dead never did. "Your father testified yesterday. He told them about finding your body at Abbey Gate, about how you'd pushed Maya Hartwell out of the blast radius, about how the last thing you said was that the legacy continues." Her voice caught. "He told them that legacy meant more than bloodlines or family names. It meant standing up when standing felt impossible. It meant fighting for what was right even when the system told you to back down." She knelt, touched the stone with 2 fingers. "I kept my promise. I finished what you started. Whatever happens tomorrow, you can rest knowing that Porter will never hurt anyone again." Footsteps behind her. She turned. Callum Shaw stood at the edge of the gravesite, his uniform jacket open tie, loosened, looking 10 years older than he had that morning. "I thought I'd find you here," he said. "I needed to tell him it's almost done." Shaw walked to stand beside her, looking down at his son's name. Declan believed in second chances. He believed people could be better than their worst moments. I used to think that made him naive. He was quiet for a moment. Now I think it made him braver than I ever was. He saved my life. I know. He called me the night before the explosion, told me he'd met Ghost Viper's 3rd student, said if anything happened to him I should find you and tell you something. Maya looked up. "What?" "He said you carry too much weight, that you think you have to save everyone because you couldn't save him. He said to tell you that some things aren't your fault, that survival isn't a debt you have to repay." The words hit like bullets. Maya stood, turned away, blinking hard. "He was wrong," she managed. "I do owe a debt. To him, to Ghost Viper, to every person who died while I lived. That's survivor's guilt talking. Declan wouldn't want. Declan doesn't get a choice. He's dead. I'm alive. And I get to decide what that means." Shaw was quiet for a long moment. Then, "My wife left me 6 months after Declan died. She said I was obsessed, that I was turning our son's death into a crusade instead of grieving properly. She said I needed to let go." "Did you?" "No, because letting go meant admitting his death was meaningless, meant accepting that the institution he died for didn't care enough to stop men like Porter." Shaw's jaw tightened. "I couldn't let that be his legacy, so I fought, and I lost. And then you showed up and finished what I couldn't. We finished it together." "No, you finished it. I just provided the ammunition." He pulled something from his pocket, held it out. Dog tags worn and dented, Declan Shaw's name stamped into the metal. "These should have gone to his mother, but she doesn't want them, doesn't want anything that reminds her of him." Maya stared at the tags, not taking them. "He'd want you to have them," Shaw said. "You're his legacy more than I ever was." "I can't." "You can. You will." He pressed them into her hand, closed her fingers around the metal. "Promise me something. When this is over, when Porter's in Leavenworth and the investigation is closed, you'll stop punishing yourself for surviving. You'll accept that you're allowed to be happy, that living isn't a betrayal of the dead." Maya's throat was too tight to speak. She nodded. Shaw stepped back, came to attention, rendered a perfect salute to his son's grave. Then he walked away, leaving Maya alone with ghosts and promises. She stood there until full dark, the dog tags warm in her palm, and made a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. The tribunal reconvened at 9 a.m. the next morning. The chamber was packed, every seat filled, observers standing along the walls. News cameras weren't allowed inside, but reporters crowded the hallway waiting for the verdict that would determine whether justice was still possible in an institution designed to protect its own. Maya sat in the same back row seat, Mallory Page beside her, now both of them silent and tense. Colonel Vance entered. Everyone stood. "Be seated." She looked at Porter, her face unreadable. "Captain Porter, please stand." Porter stood. His lawyers stood with him, hands on his shoulders, like they could physically hold him upright if the verdict crushed him. This tribunal has reviewed all evidence, heard all testimony, and deliberated extensively on the charges brought against you. Vance paused, let the silence build. On the charge of conduct unbecoming an officer, we find you guilty on all 14 counts. Porter's knees buckled slightly. His lawyers gripped harder. On the charge of unlawful surveillance, guilty on all 23 counts. On the charge of sexual harassment, guilty on all 7 counts. On the charge of obstruction of justice, guilty on all 4 counts. Vance's voice didn't waver, didn't soften. Captain Lance Porter, you have betrayed your oath, dishonored your service, and inflicted immeasurable harm on those you were duty-bound to protect. The maximum sentence for these combined charges is 30 years confinement, total forfeiture of pay and allowances, and dismissal from service. She looked at the tribunal members. It is the finding of this court that you will serve 22 years confinement at the United States Disciplinary Barracks, Fort Leavenworth. You will forfeit all pay and allowances. You will be dismissed from service with a dishonorable discharge. All veterans' benefits are revoked. This sentence will be reviewed by the convening authority, but I will personally recommend no clemency. The gavel came down. Porter collapsed into his chair, face gray hands shaking. His lawyers were already whispering about appeals, about procedural errors, about how Senator Porter would never let this stand. But Maya saw the truth in Vance's eyes. This verdict was bulletproof. The evidence was overwhelming. Porter was going to Leavenworth, and he was staying there. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Mallory grabbed Maya's hand, squeezed hard enough to hurt. "It's over," she whispered. "It's really over." But it wasn't. Not yet. Senator Graham Porter stood in the gallery, his face rigid with fury. He pushed through the crowd, headed for the prosecutor's table. "This is a miscarriage of justice," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "My son will appeal. This conviction will be overturned. You haven't heard the last of this." Colonel Matthews stood slowly, deliberately. "Senator, with all due respect, your son is a convicted felon who will spend the next 2 decades in a military prison. The only thing anyone will hear from him is a prison number." He picked up his briefcase. "And if you attempt to interfere with this sentence, if you use your position to obstruct justice one more time, I will personally ensure the JAG Corps investigates your role in covering up his crimes. Are we clear?" The senator's face went purple. But he said nothing, just turned and stormed out. Maya left through a side door, avoiding the press, avoiding the victims who were crying and hugging and celebrating justice finally served. She needed air, needed space, needed to process what had just happened. She made it to the parking lot before Callum Shaw caught up with her. "Where are you going?" "Home, Virginia. Back to my life." Just like that. No goodbye, no debrief, just vanish. That was always the plan. Maya unlocked her truck. "Porter's in prison. The system worked barely. My job here is done." "Your job?" Shaw laughed bitterly. "You still don't get it, do you? This was never a job. This was redemption. For you, for me, for every person who failed those women." "I don't need redemption. I need to go home." "To what, an empty house and a husband who worries every time you deploy into someone else's war?" Shaw gripped her shoulder. "Declan died believing this place mattered. You proved him right. Don't waste that by running away from the people who need you to keep fighting." Maya pulled free. "I'm not running. I'm leaving. There's a difference." "Is there?" She didn't answer. Just climbed into the truck and drove. But she didn't go to Virginia. She went to Asheville. Kendra Wright lived in a small apartment on the south side of town, accessible only by a ramp that had been poorly installed and was already cracking at the edges. Maya knocked, waited. Wright opened the door in her wheelchair, face suspicious, until recognition dawned. "You're the one from the news, the one who broke the story." "My name is Maya. I was hoping we could talk." Wright hesitated, then backed the wheelchair up to let Maya inside. The apartment was small and cluttered, medical equipment taking up most of the living room, prescription bottles lined up on the kitchen counter like soldiers. Photos on the walls showed a different Kendra Wright, standing tall in uniform, smiling whole. "I'm not doing any more interviews," Wright said. "I testified. That's all I've got left to give." "I'm not here for an interview. I'm here to apologize." "For what?" "For not finding you sooner. For not stopping Porter before he destroyed your career." Maya sat on the couch, careful not to crowd the wheelchair. "I should have seen the pattern earlier. Should have moved faster." Wright stared at her, then laughed without humor. "You think this is your fault, that you should have saved me?" She rolled closer. "Lady, I don't need saving. I needed justice, and you gave me that. Porter's in Leavenworth. That's enough. Is it? You're in a wheelchair. You lost your career. You lost. I lost nothing I wasn't willing to sacrifice. Wright's voice hardened. I joined the Army to serve. I got hurt serving. That's the deal. What I couldn't accept was getting hurt by someone who wore the same uniform someone the system protected while I got thrown away. She rolled to the window, looked out at the street. You know what the worst part was? Not the fall, not the pain, not even the discharge. It was the silence. Everyone knew Porter was dirty, but no one would say it. Everyone knew women were getting hurt, but no one would act. That silence killed me more than the broken ankle. And now the silence is broken. Now every woman who joins knows what happened to us. Knows that the system can work if someone's willing to fight for it. Wright turned back. You did that. Don't diminish it by apologizing for not doing it sooner. Maya was quiet for a long moment. What will you do now? Physical therapy. Figure out how to walk again, even if it's just with canes. Apply to law school maybe. Use my GI Bill for something that matters. Wright smiled, brittle but real. Porter took my career, but he didn't take my purpose. I'll find a new way to serve. If you need help, references, connections, anything, I know where to find you. Wright extended her hand. Thank you for giving a damn when no one else did. Maya shook her hand, then left. She drove through Asheville's downtown past coffee shops and breweries and tourists who had no idea what battles had been fought in their name. She thought about Kendra Wright, rebuilding her life from ruins. About Mallory Page, still training at Fort Liberty, still fighting to prove she belonged. About 8 women who'd testified publicly who'd faced their abuser and refused to break. She thought about Declan Shaw, 22 years old, pushing her out of a blast radius because he believed some people were worth saving. Maybe he'd been right. Her phone rang. Garrett. Where are you? North Carolina, Asheville. The verdict came through. 22 years. Dishonorable discharge. The senator's already screaming about appeals, but Matthews says it's solid. I know, I was there. Then why aren't you coming home? Maya pulled over, parked on a side street, watched people walking past with their ordinary lives and ordinary problems. Because I don't know what home means anymore. I spent 6 years training to be an operator, 3 years trying to be normal, and now I've spent 2 months being the person Ghost Viper trained me to be. Her voice cracked. I don't know how to go back to dinner parties and small talk and pretending the world isn't full of people who need help. So don't go back. What? You heard me. Don't go back to normal. Normal's overrated. Garrett's voice was steady. Shaw called me this morning. He's being forced to retire, but he's got a plan. A training program for military women who've faced harassment or assault. Teach them self-defense, legal advocacy, how to document abuse, how to fight back safely. That's not. He wants you to run it. You and whoever else you think should be involved. Full funding through a veterans nonprofit facilities at a private compound in Virginia. Completely outside military chain of command so no one can shut it down when it gets inconvenient. Maya sat very still. Why me? Because you're the only person he trusts to do it right. Because you understand what it's like to watch good people destroyed by broken systems. Because Declan Shaw's legacy doesn't end with Porter's conviction. It continues with you. She closed her eyes, saw Declan's face in the moment before the explosion, young and certain and unafraid. Tell my dad the legacy continues. I need to think about it. Think fast. Shaw needs an answer by tomorrow. Garrett hung up. Maya sat in the truck for 20 minutes thinking about legacies and promises and the weight of carrying forward what the dead had started. Then she drove to Fort Liberty. Shaw was in his office packing boxes, preparing for the retirement that had been forced on him as punishment for daring to expose institutional rot. You came back, he said. I heard about the training program. And why me? You could run it yourself. You know the system, you know the people. I know how the system failed. You know how to beat it. Shaw set down the photo frame he'd been wrapping, looked at her directly. I'm 54 years old. I'm exhausted. I'm angry. I'm compromised by my son's death and my own failures. You're 26. You're skilled. You're not carrying institutional baggage. And you have something I lost years ago. What? Hope. You still believe this can be fixed. I'm not sure I do anymore. Maya thought about Kendra Wright learning to walk again. About Mallory Page still training despite Porter's attempts to break her. About 8 women who'd testified despite knowing it would destroy their privacy and invite harassment. What would this program actually do? Teach women how to fight back. Not just physically, though, that's part of it, but legally. How to document harassment, how to build cases, how to navigate military bureaucracy, how to be their own advocates when the system fails them. Shaw pulled out a folder, handed it to her. I've got funding for 3 years, facilities for 20 students at a time, instructors lined up who actually give a damn. All we need is someone to lead it. Maya opened the folder. Budget projections, curriculum outlines, letters of support from senators who weren't Graham Porter. Declan Shaw Memorial Training Program, she read aloud. He'd hate having his name on it. He was humble like that. Shaw's voice roughened. But I need something good to come from his death. I need to believe he didn't die for nothing. Maya closed the folder. I'll do it. On 2 conditions. Name them. First, Mallory Page is part of the first class. She's earned it. Agreed. Second condition. The women who testified, the ones who want to be involved, they get priority for enrollment or instructor positions. This program exists because they had the courage to speak. They should benefit from it. Shaw extended his hand. Deal. They shook on it. 6 months later, Maya stood in the renovated compound in Virginia watching 20 women run through obstacle courses designed not for military deployment, but for the specific challenges of surviving institutional harassment. They learned hand-to-hand combat from instructors who understood that sometimes the enemy wore your own uniform. They learned legal strategy from lawyers who'd fought and won against military bureaucracy. They learned documentation techniques from journalists who'd exposed corruption when official channels failed. And they learned that survival wasn't weakness, that asking for help wasn't surrender, that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was refuse to be silent. Mallory Page was there, no longer a cadet, but a graduate who'd finished her service on her own terms and joined the program as an instructor. Kendra Wright was there too, walking with canes, now teaching a course on disability rights and reasonable accommodation. 3 of the other victims who'd testified had joined as well, each bringing their own expertise, their own hard-won knowledge. Garrett visited every weekend, bringing supplies, offering advice, staying out of the way when Maya needed to work. And Callum Shaw came once a month, sitting in on classes, watching women learn to fight back against the system that had failed them. On the 6-month anniversary of the program's opening, Maya stood at the memorial wall she'd built in the compound's entrance. 13 names from Abbey Gate carved into black granite. Declan Shaw's name third from the left, second row, exactly as it appeared at Fort Liberty. Below that, a plaque. The legacy doesn't end. It continues, one person at a time. Rowan Thatcher, 19 years old, newest student in the program, stood beside her reading the names. Who were they? He asked. Marines, soldiers, people who died believing this country was worth defending. And you knew them. I knew one. He saved my life. I'm trying to honor that by helping others save themselves. Rowan was quiet, looking at the names. My sister was at Fort Liberty. She quit after 6 months. Wouldn't tell my parents why. Just said it wasn't what she thought it would be. He touched the wall gently. I found out later it was Porter. He'd targeted her, broken her confidence, made her believe she was too weak to serve. What's her name? Sarah Thatcher. She's working retail now, barely speaks to the family, drinks too much, can't hold down a job. Is she victim 24? I don't know. She won't talk about it. Rowan turned to Maya. I joined this program because I don't want to be useless when the people I love are hurting. I want to know how to help, how to fight back, how to make sure what happened to Sarah doesn't keep happening. Maya saw Declan Shaw in this kid's face. The same determination, the same need to believe that service mattered, that justice was possible, that one person could make a difference. Then we'll teach you, she said. Not just how to fight, how to win. The program grew. By the end of year 1, they'd trained 80 women and 15 men, all of them connected to military harassment cases, all of them determined to change the system from within. Some went back to active duty armed with knowledge and confidence. Others became advocates, lawyers, journalists, politicians. 2 became instructors at Fort Liberty itself, hired specifically to implement new harassment prevention protocols. Porter's conviction became precedent. 3 other cases were brought forward, using the same legal strategies, the same documentation methods, the same refusal to accept institutional silence. All 3 resulted in convictions. Senator Graham Porter lost his re-election, bid his name too tainted by his son's crimes to recover. He retired from politics, released a statement about needing to focus on family, and was never heard from publicly again. And Maya Hartwell, who'd spent 6 years learning to be Ghost Viper's weapon, 3 years trying to forget, and 6 months remembering why she'd been trained in the first place, found something she'd thought was lost forever. Purpose. On a cold morning in March, 2 years after Porter's conviction, Maya stood in Arlington National Cemetery at a grave she'd visited only once before. Ghost Viper's headstone was simple. James Aldrich, Master Sergeant 1950 to 2022. No mention of classified operations or clandestine training programs, just a name and dates and the acknowledgement that he'd served. Maya knelt, placed a challenge coin on the stone. The coin bore the Ghost Viper emblem on one side, the Declan Shaw Memorial Program logo on the other. "I kept my promises," she said quietly. "All of them. Declan's legacy continues. The women you trained me to protect are safer because of what we built. The system's still broken, but we're fixing it, one person at a time." She stood, rendered a salute she'd never given while he was alive because he'd forbidden such formality. "Thank you for believing I was worth training, for seeing what I could become when I couldn't see it myself, for giving me a purpose that outlasted you." The wind picked up, scattering dead leaves across the cemetery grounds. Maya walked back to her truck where Garrett waited, patient as always. "Ready to go home?" he asked. She looked back at the grave one last time, then at her husband, then at the road ahead. "Yeah," she said. "I'm ready." Home wasn't Virginia anymore. Home was the compound, the students, the mission that gave shape to her days and meaning to the scars she carried. Home was knowing that Declan Shaw's last words hadn't been a burden, but a gift. The legacy continues, and it would continue long after she was gone, carried forward by every person who learned to fight back, who refused to be silent, who believed that justice was worth the cost. Maya Hartwell had made her peace with survival, had accepted that living wasn't a debt to be repaid, but an opportunity to be seized. She'd learned finally what Ghost Viper had tried to teach her all along. The strongest weapon wasn't the rifle or the knife or the perfectly executed chokehold. It was the refusal to quit. The insistence on standing up even when standing seemed impossible. The cold, hard certainty that some things mattered more than comfort, more than safety, more than life itself. Justice. Truth. The protection of those who couldn't protect themselves. That was the legacy. That was what Declan had died for. And that was what Maya would live for every day for the rest of her life. The truck pulled away from Arlington, heading south toward Virginia, toward the compound, toward the next class of students who needed to learn that survival was possible and silence was optional. Maya looked at the dog tags hanging from her rearview mirror. Declan Shaw's name caught the light metal worn smooth from 3 years of carrying them everywhere. "The legacy continues," she said quietly. And somewhere in whatever place the dead occupied, she imagined Declan Shaw smiling. His work was done. Hers was just beginning. And that was exactly how it should be.